So again, welcome to tonight's roundtable discussion on land conservation and affordable housing. My name is Amy Patterson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut Land Conservation Council, or CLCC. And with me from our CLCC team is Ricky Bentley, our Program Manager, who's going to be helping to guide us through the questions tonight. And tonight's speakers are David Hindin and Connie Manes, who I will introduce to you shortly. Just as a matter of some housekeeping before we launch into the presentations, we are recording just the presentations only. Once those are done, we're going to stop recording to give you the freedom of, candor and comfort in having a conversation around the topic tonight. Please stay muted during the presentations, and we do prefer that you turn your video off during presentations as well. It's a little less distracting for those that are presenting with their PowerPoints. Throughout, and I really can't emphasize this enough, please put your questions in the chat. We're going to be talking about a lot, and as questions arise, rather than interrupt the speaker and have to pause, we'd like to get through the presentations as best as possible and then really have a robust discussion at the end. However, if there's a point of clarification that you need, please note that in the chat and just say, need clarification, and then put your question there. And then again, Ricky and I will be monitoring, and we can pause the speaker and ask for that clarification. After the presentations, we'll run through your questions that are in the chat, and then we will open it up to all of you to raise your hand and pose your questions or your comments together here, on the screen. So I'm now going to share my screen. There we go. Can you all see that? Somebody, thumbs up? Great, thank you. So again, a quick introduction of the Connecticut Land Conservation Council, or CLCC. We are the umbrella organization for Connecticut's land trusts and the communities that they serve. Our mission is to elevate and strengthen land conservation in Connecticut, and a main part of our vision is to ensure that every community is supported by a diversity of conserved land, and that land conservation is embraced as an essential community value. As the state association for Connecticut's land trusts, we recognize and understand that there are a diverse group of land trusts. There's about 120 of them in Connecticut, and they all have different needs and challenges. And so we take a multifaceted approach when it comes to serving those needs and challenges of our land trusts. In 2023 and into 2024, we conducted a census to get an even better idea of what those challenges and needs and opportunities were with respect to our land trusts. And I'm not going to run through these numbers for you, but we have, again, about 117 land trusts, and you can see they range from single town, all volunteer organizations to some statewide powerhouses. And together they've conserved over 200,000 acres of land. Our census report is on the website, and it is a driver for what we're going to talk about tonight. You can also look on our website to see the breadth of programming that we provide to the land trust. And it ranges from everything from technical and financial assistance, training and education. We are a convener and offer networking opportunities. We advocate for land conservation at the Capitol, with many conservation priorities having been met this year. It was a good year at the Capitol for us this year for land conservation. One of the main focus areas of our programming, and this really applies across the board, no matter what the size of the land trust or the community that they serve, and that is our community-centered conservation. And I'm just going to really take a snippet of what we have on our website, and I encourage you again to really explore some of the programming that we have around that. But we believe that when land trusts engage a broader diversity of people, they not only build stronger communities, they strengthen long-term support for the land itself. And that really does help drive our community-centered conservation. One of those community needs, as we all know, here in Connecticut is the lack of affordable housing. And so we started to explore that through some of our programming. We started with some community-centered conservation conversations, roundtables around the state, and then we started to put together some summits on the topic. In 2023, we convened a summit on housing and conservation, and we covered concepts and projects, policy legislation, community land trust. We had a number of panels. And really the message there was that while land conservation and affordable housing are often framed as competing priorities, Connecticut communities need both to thrive. We followed that up in 2024 with a summit on land use planning in Connecticut to try and take a step back even more broadly and look at land more holistically through a number of different lenses. And it was very cool because we were able to bring together two panels. One in the morning was our grass tops panel, and that consisted of commissioners of Department of Agriculture, Energy and Environmental Protection, housing, and leaders from the Department of Economic and Community Development, Office of Policy Management. They had a really robust discussion on interagency collaboration when it comes to land use. And then in the afternoon, we brought together some grassroots leaders who had that same type of conversation. And it was really interesting to see how they synced and how they didn't. And again, the message there was that the challenge of building community is knowing how to hear every voice in the room and unite them toward common ground and understanding. CLCC as a statewide association is not the only organization in the country or the region that is addressing this issue. Again, affordable housing is a national crisis as well. The National Land Trust Alliance, which is the national umbrella for the country's land trusts, has been exploring this issue and has put out a terrific guide, which I have a piece of here, and took the just the quote about the goal of the resource is to help land trusts get started on a pathway to allyship and partnership. And similarly here in Connecticut, the next year, so that was in 23, in 2024, right here in Connecticut, and this is what Connie is going to focus on tonight. In Northwest Connecticut, we have a terrific collaboration that worked together to create this wonderful report and some terrific results that she's going to share tonight. Sorry. And then finally, what we did was we took a look at the questions that we had in our census around affordable housing. And there were just a few, but there were some very interesting results. And we asked David Hindin to assist us in digging down deeper by interviewing the land trusts that had replied to those questions, expressing some level of interest in affordable housing as conservation land trusts. And David worked with us to do some interviews and then pull together this report that has the status and recommendations resulting from those interviews, which we will talk about tonight. So I'd like to introduce our speakers, David Hindin and Connie Manes, and then turn this presentation over to them. I'll start with David, and I'm going to read his bio. David uses his legal, behavioral science, leadership, and storytelling expertise to help address our ecological crises. His current focus areas are affordable housing and land conservation collaboration, climate change, thought leadership, and leading change. David has been conducting research and advocacy for the past few years on the opportunity and value of land conservation trust to support affordable housing. He was the co-author of a January 2023 working paper for the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy on this topic, and he presented at Rally in 2023, 24, and will be doing so again in 25. And when I say Rally, I mean the National Land Trust Conference that the National Land Trust Alliance presents every year. It's fantastic. David was an enforcement attorney and senior executive at the US EPA, protecting public health and the environment. His career included litigating enforcement cases to reduce pollution, managing information systems, providing public access to information, and using evidence to modernize programs. Welcome, David. And Connie Manes is likely no stranger to many of you here in the room. She is here tonight as a consultant to the Housatonic Valley Association. And in partnership with colleagues at the Litchfield County Center for Housing Opportunity and with support from the Berkshire Taconic Community Foundation and Foundation for Community Health, Connie directs the Northwest Connecticut Affordable Housing and Conservation Collaborative, which brings together land trusts in the Litchfield Hills Greenprint Collaborative with affordable housing advocates and municipal leaders. Connie is the executive director of the Kent Land Trust, an accredited land trust serving the community of Kent. And privately and as a circuit rider of the Land Trust Alliance, Connie also provides organizational consulting services to nonprofit conservation organizations with a focus on land trust standards and practices and land trust accreditation. She holds a master's degree in public administration from PACE and a JD from the NYU School of Law. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to David so he can share his. But welcome, everybody, and thank you.
Thanks, Amy. I'm going to hopefully share my screen. If somebody can give me
You are
a
good,
heads up.
David. You just need to put it in presentation mode and you're all set. Looks good.
All right. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Since you have your camera off, it's a good time to finish dinner. But I'm going to talk about affordable housing, what I've learned in my research and talking to a lot of people over the past moving to 4 years. These are two pictures in Connecticut. The three little kids have some relationship to Connie. I'll let her talk about that. And that's also affordable housing in Connecticut as well. So in my view, affordable housing and conservation can be viewed as win-win. And this little Venn diagram says, on one side, conserved land. I think everybody in this webinar knows the value from a wildlife, nature, all the values of conserved land. But we also know that there's a major need for safe, climate resilient, affordable homes with access to green space. And that's key. And so my view is that there's some overlap between those people who care about conserving land and those people who care about affordable homes. And the overlap is, as I showed, is not 100%. So I'm not suggesting that every conservation project is going to have an affordable housing element, and not every affordable housing element is going to have a conserved land. Maybe it's 10 to 15% of your work for some land trust would be in that sweet spot. And we'll talk more about why I think there is a sweet spot there. Just very quickly, there is a huge affordable housing gap in the US. Per US HUD, the affordable housing is basically defined if where you don't need to spend more than 30% of your gross income. And in 2023, just 16% of homes were affordable, which is down considerably from 50% in 2013. There's a national low-income housing coalition estimates a gap of 7.3 million rental units for the lowest income renters. And those are folks with incomes below 30% of the average median income. I could spend time on Connecticut statistics, but virtually everywhere in the country, there is a huge affordable housing gap. So why should affordable housing and land conservation trusts collaborate? There's lots of good reasons. Climate crisis, affordable housing, biodiversity loss, and injustice. And currently we have demands for land to meet multiple changing needs, especially with climate. The Land Trust Alliance Standard 8B talks about community conservation. And what I'm going to say is conservation affordable housing organizations actually have more in common. They have complementary values, some common interests, but complementary interests and talents. And what I think really unites these groups, conservation affordable housing organizations, is they both work on the long-term beneficial use of land not addressed by the for-profit sector. And I want to pause on that and make sure that people really get that, because if you're in the land conservation world and you work with land conservation folks, you might say, these are my peeps, these are my people. I would argue that when you work with other people in the nonprofit sector, you're going to have similar views that these people get. These people are trying to do what the market doesn't do, which is generate land conservation and affordable housing. So you have more in common than you think. Why collaborate? What are some outcomes? Conserve more land. Climate resilient affordable housing could be energy efficient with solar, severe heat, flooding, and storms, community engagement, fostering happier and healthier people. Affordable housing tends to be more environmentally friendly just because it tends to be more efficient. And it's also usually smaller sizes. So we're not talking about McMansions or mansions. Oops. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background research. When I did the work for the Lincoln Institute, I started with data from the Land Trust Alliance on a survey they did, and their initial results were much higher. And I did a similar interviewing strategy. I interviewed a random sample of those people who said they did affordable housing, and it was less than the people who checked the box. And I'd say it was about 8 to 9% of nationally, here I'm speaking, supported affordable housing in some way. I've spoken to a lot of executive directors who were working in affordable housing, and I often ask them, why are you doing this? And there was some level that it just resonated with them. It was in their blood, it was in their family, it was in their histories, and it really was community-centered conservation for them. I recently did this for the Connecticut Land Trust Alliance, and I'm going to go through this a little bit more detail, but I'd say about 14% of the land trusts in Connecticut are supporting affordable housing in some way, and we'll come back to some way. And there are many ways land trusts can support affordable housing. I want to be careful to make sure I'm not suggesting that the people on this webinar are going to go out and start designing, building, or managing affordable housing. There are a couple of land trusts who have ventured into that, but generally there's a lot of other things land trusts can do to support affordable housing that has nothing to do with design, build, and managing housing. So just a little bit on the research I did in Connecticut. So back when I did this, I estimated there were 120. I think there's been some consolidations. I think, Amy, you just said 117. The census, which is basically a survey, 101 land trusts responded to that. In the census, 44 land trusts said they did something on affordable housing. I tend to be a skeptical guy, and so I interviewed as many of them as I could, either by email or live interviews or short. And my guess is that 44 was really closer to 17. And we had a bunch of folks who didn't respond. And in Connecticut, there are a lot of land trusts that don't have staff. So some simple arithmetic, I came up with about 14% support of affordable housing in some way of the total number of 120. If you just look at the number 101 who responded, it's a little higher. And again, I spoke to a lot of people. I exchanged emails. We gave people many opportunities. I had many interesting conversations with executive directors and board members. So my guess is about 14% land trusts in Connecticut have done something to support affordable housing. I do want to talk about hurdles and this is not easy work. So I don't want to tell you, yes, this is easy to do. You can go off and do this. And I want to go through some of the hurdles, and then what I'm going to talk about and what Connie's going to talk about is ways to overcome hurdles. So we view this as deepening your mission to engage in work, but it's outside traditional conservation practices. So what we're really talking about is this is an organization, individual change effort. And you know what, for most people, including myself, change is hard. And so the next time I do this presentation, I might emphasize more that this is org change. You're trying to change your organization in some way, and there's lots of levers to do that. Unfortunately, there's a lack of funding that supports both. And if you read the news, you know that that's a bigger problem. There are some conflicts between land conservation and affordable housing, so that sort of muddies the picture. So you have to get past some of this history of conflicts. And then if you truly integrate a project where you buy 100 acres and you split, 10 acres that are close to the road are going to do affordable housing and 90 acres are going to be conservation, these projects can be a bit more difficult. But land conservation projects are not usually easy anyhow, so they may be a little bit more difficult. But you can get past these hurdles. Some land trusts are doing it today, and we're going to talk about some ways to go forward. So I view this as sort of a three-part process if you're a land trust and you have some interest in affordable housing. And if you're on this webinar, most likely you are in box 1, you're learning about it. But I want to pause and say there's a foundational element, which is if you can avoid opposing affordable housing in your community, that would really help. I'm not suggesting that if there's an affordable housing project being built in the middle of a wetland and it's precious land, you will need to come out against it. But again, think about, do you really need to get into these fights? Because there is a history and it hurts us as we move forward. But with that sort of foundation, don't oppose it. Let me go through these sort of 3 steps, but I call it a foundation because if you want to expand your community and you want affordable housing folks to support you and you want to support them, you need to be very careful. If the land has no compelling, unique ecological value and it's already developed land, my recommendation is I wouldn't oppose it. If it's open space that's immediately adjacent to transportation and utilities, it's probably going to be developed. And most likely, if it's developed without affordable housing, you might not like what's going to be there anyhow. So think very carefully about short-term benefits versus long-term. And what some of this community-centered conservation work is about building additional folks who want to support conservation work. So step 1 on this journey, learn about affordable housing. So this webinar is sort of part of step 1. There are webinars, there are workshops. Has your board discussed it more than once? Is anybody on the board or staff been assigned to research it, to pay attention to it? Those are sort of all in the learning stage. After learning, we talk about building relationships with affordable housing groups. And Connie's going to talk about the amazing work she's done in building purposeful relationships. I'm aware of my research, two of these relationships that have been built. One is in the Hudson Valley in New York and one here in Connecticut. And Connie will talk about that. But if you have the opportunity to join or start a group where you've got land conservation and housing exploring, that's a great first step. If you have board members or staff who could serve on a housing group or a committee in your community, and Connecticut is in some cases easier to do on this because it's so many small local towns where people are on different committees. Could you invite a housing representative to serve on your land trust board, even if it's ex officio to start? Visit affordable housing properties, meet with housing groups. This one gets a little bit hard, but share staff, technical, legal, or other resources that you have with affordable housing groups. So that's also building purposeful relationships. And that I would say is a foundation. And then if you've learned, if you're built some relationship, you can start looking at doing projects together. So join a coalition that is not just exploring, but is looking to advance conservation and affordable housing. They can do this through policy in lots of ways. Some land trusts have improved access to conserved land for affordable housing residents. They create trails, community gardens, parks. You could also, with your housing partners that you've gotten through the relationships, you can do joint advocacy for a project, policies, and funding. Legislative bodies tend to really pay attention if a housing and a conservation group comes together and says, we want to support this project, this effort. And you can point to people that these are complementary efforts. You can't do any of these without relationships. So that's why step 2 is so important. Look for funding with housing partners, and then purchase property and allocate among housing, conservation, and agriculture. These are happening more and more, where one piece of property is being allocated among different uses. But this is the work that you need to have relationships with housing groups in order to do it most successfully. So in my report, I had some recommendations for Connecticut, and I actually have several recommendations for the Land Trust Alliance. So information sharing and recognition. We're doing sessions at state and national conferences. I've done 2. I'll do another in September in Cleveland at Raleigh. Awards for conservation land trusts that have done affordable housing work. They can get awards. And there are efforts underway, and if you come to Raleigh, you might hear about one. Website resources and tools. Connie talked about some of the resources they have on their website. Rhode Island has tools and resources. I've been talking to the Land Trust Alliance about creating a housing conservation peer learning network. And this would be land trusts that have done some of this work or are interested in creating some learning network among them. And I'm not quite sure when the Alliance is going to do this. It could be more like 2026, but there will be a breakfast at Raleigh where we will talk about this. And then Connie and I also have our own workshop on this. Other recommendations for associations: foster collaboration and do some advocacy at the policy level, legal and funding, state, regional, and local levels. I think a year ago, I had federal in this last bullet, but I've taken that out. So the conclusion is learn about affordable housing. This is step 1, create relationships, and then look to do projects together. So this is a very rational, sequential approach. There are land trusts that have not followed this 1, 2, 3 approach, but what happened is a funder comes by and say, I'm going to give you 100 acres, but I want you to build 20 affordable housing units. And so there are what I call these pop-ups where somehow the land trust gets pulled into doing this. Sometimes they don't understand the opportunity, and sometimes they're really not in a good position to move forward effectively. So that's why we take sort of a very rational approach of building these steps. And there's a lot more details here on this, but for now, that gives you a sense of the research I've done, and I've probably spoken to 100 executive directors and board members over the last 3 years. And there is more and more work going on in this area. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Amy.
David, thank you so much. And the chat is very quiet. We don't have any questions. So I will tell you that if we get to the end of Connie's presentation and there are no questions from you, we have plenty of discussion questions, from you to them. We have plenty of questions from us to you. So please don't be shy and put your questions and comments in that chat. Thank you. Connie, take it away.
Okay, great. Thanks, Amy. Give me a moment to just get my slideshow up. And I think it's up. So, so hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. I have many slides, so I'm going to go through them kind of quickly, and I hope that that is effective. I really want to get to the discussion part of this program. So, as Amy's introduction said, I engage in this project in a consultant role now with the Housatonic Valley Association, but it began when I was working for the Housatonic Valley Association as the coordinator of the Litchfield Hills Greenprint Collaborative, which is a regional conservation partnership, essentially a network of conservation organizations working together within the same geographic area. So our area is Northwest Connecticut. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our project. I led this project with Jocelyn Ayers, who's kind of like my RCP counterpart for housing organizations. Bet you might not have known about that. conservation organizations group together, but housing organizations do as well. And Jocelyn and her colleague Lindsay Larson, who is on this webinar tonight, are my colleagues who kind of serve that function for Northwest Connecticut housing organizations. I also just want to give credit to Lindsay. I am reusing in a slightly modified version slides that we presented at the CLCC conference this past March. So thanks, Lindsay. All right, let me figure out how to advance. Great. All right, I'm not really going to go deep into this. David did, but I just want to point out that affordable housing is not charity, it's equity. Okay, so I think that's a really important shift in how some people might think about this problem, which most at this point acknowledge. The profit-driven market caters to high wage earners. And in Litchfield County, what that has meant is it's resulted in over 9,000 households that are thought to be severely cost burdened is the terminology, which really just means that they spend more than half of their monthly income on housing. And people who live in affordable housing are low and moderate income workers. They might be seniors with limited retirement income, but they are people just like you and me who are living in our towns and working there and raising families and having families. Not charity, equity. I'm going to skip this slide, sorry. And it's not really new that land trusts and housing organizations or land trusts are starting to talk about affordable housing and what their role might be in it. I think we all recognize this is a pervasive problem and are wondering how we fit in as organizations that are meant to serve the public good and confer a public benefit. I was really inspired in 2023 when CLCC put on its summit. I was there and I really loved what I heard about the Hudson Valley Alliance for Housing and Conservation. And I think one of our colleagues from Columbia Land Conservancy is on the line with us tonight. But anyway, I saw that example and people who know me know that I, don't talk about overcoming hurdles. I talk about jumping over them. I talk about actively confronting the hurdles. So I said, I want to do that. I think we could do that. Let's try it. Jocelyn and Lindsay were game and we were off. With the Litchfield County Center for Housing Opportunity, we had the opportunity grant funded to replicate a little bit of what they did in the Hudson Valley. And the Green Print and HVA were perfect. It was a perfect leader to do this because all of the towns that they wanted to serve were included in the Green Print region, and the land trusts there were partners of the Green Print. So just to go over what we were trying to do, our project goal was to equip communities with tools to make better decisions about land use, to make good decisions, I should say, no value judgment there, but also to be able to have dialogue when opportunities arise, which is a really important pushback against what David was saying, don't be in opposition. Don't be surprised. The more we talk, the less surprises that there will be. And that is one of the really key take homes about the relationship building that we did. Getting ahead of myself though. So there were 8 towns that participated in this project. It involved 40 organizations and commissions, 60 individuals. We took at least one participant from each towns, and the 8 towns are there on your right-hand side of the screen. At least one participant from the local housing organization, from the local land trust, from the Planning and Zoning Commission, a member of the Board of Selectmen, and we also had our regional conservation organizations, and we had our regional housing organization, and we had the Council of Governments there. So what do we do? This is not rocket science, but I'm really proud of our work because I think you'll agree with me that we made significant progress and that we've started a momentum that's really going to lead to, some really terrific work. So in late 2023, we were awarded the grant. So we started inviting people to attend meetings beginning in 2024. In 2024, we held, I think it was like 7 meetings, mostly in person, in between January and September. And together, we created a shared purpose statement. And that was on that front slide you saw. Healthy communities need both affordable housing and conserved land. So that was our shared purpose statement. We created maps, which I'll show you. We developed as a group specific strategies that each of our organizations could pursue in order, to be true to the purpose statement. We did make a report, which we did in PDF, but we also made a web page. And then we said, what else can we do? And so we started phase 2 in 2025. And some of the things that we're doing this year is we're continuing our work by having people take the report back to their boards and getting an affirmative opt-in to it. We have designed a communication strategy, which includes a farmers market tabling kit, as well as Facebook and Instagram assets and posts that are sequential and build on each other. And we're available for community conversations, specifically within communities. So here are some of the, I kind of just said them, but some of the tangible work products, the strategy report, the web page. We made a film. We have the mapping tool. We have some links. We have social media strategies. I skipped over relationship building. Why? That is the most important outcome of what we did together to begin the conversation, to establish a ground point of trust, and to find where our alignments were and think about how we each were serving our communities. Okay, so now I'm just going to show you some of what this looks like. So I'm going to go really quickly, but again, you can see the cover of our report, which is available in a PDF download, but we also created a web page, and the web page is navigable, and you can get to all of the information in the report in that way. Just dipping into the report so you can see what I was talking about with the specific strategies. So you can see on the left-hand side that there were drop-down boxes showing what affordable housing and conservation organizations could both do, a list of those specific strategies on the right here. But then we have specific strategies that are particular to the affordable housing organizations, to the conservation organizations, to the P&Zs, and to the boards of selectmen. I encourage you to go to the webpage and to take a look around in there. This is our mapping tool. Stacy Deming, who is a wizard.
You just put them both by I'll take care of it all later. I'm very anal retentive about my disclosure.
Stacy Deming created the mapping tool, which shows through different map layers the conservation priorities of the organizations that are working in in each of those 8 towns, but also has layers that are specific to development considerations in each of those 8 towns. So where zoning made a difference for where affordable housing might be developed, those zoning layers are on. Things like proximity to utilities and sewer, steep slopes, so there were things that after meeting and talking together, resonated with us on the suitability of any one parcel for conservation or development or both of those things. And this really made it real. So a cool tool and product of our work. We made a film. You can get to it through the website. I encourage you to check it out. Weirdly, I'm wearing the same shirt. Okay, fun fact. And we had a template resolution that boards could adopt. As I said, we had additional links and resources so that people could find out more. This slide is just to give you a sense of what this meant for one organization participating. And at the CLCC conference in March, Amanda Branson from the Northwest Connecticut Land Conservancy joined us to speak about how, how doing this work, thinking about how affordable housing and conservation can be in alignment and actually reinforce each other, actually complement each other, was consistent really with the strategic plan that their organization had recently developed. That, the strategic plan was all about healthy people, recognizing that people are key to environmental health and perpetuity. Also, you can see here on the slide that Amanda really called out that workforce housing applies to us as well as to all of the other, robust businesses and services that exist in our communities. And as she pointed out, relationship building and collaboration really facilitates understanding of and perspective of what other people are working towards. And then hopefully they develop that same understanding of your priorities. One thing I'll mention that I forgot before when I was talking about the mapping is that in Northwest Connecticut, we follow a climate resiliency and wildlife biodiversity strategy that is called Follow the Forest. It's about connecting core forest blocks and looking at, how we can shore up the linkages that remain where core forest has been fragmented. And so, by being able to communicate that to our housing counterparts, I think that we alleviated the fear that, land trusts may just be interested in any piece of undeveloped land. And I do believe that land trusts increase sophistication in articulating their priorities in their communities, whether or not you have a wildlife corridor initiative, is really helpful, in just kind of presenting and sharing your perspective and your priorities. All right, some lessons learned. This relationship building takes time. We kind of shortcutted it because at least on the conservation side, we had our partnership in the green print already, with a pretty firm foundation, but establishing really that base level of trust, I really can't underscore more how important that is. And that in that relationship building, it's really important to come to collective agreement that affordable housing is a pervasive need, and that communities need both affordable housing and conservation. So spend time, unpacking that, discussing that, really coming to that starting point that everyone can kind of invest in. Is like, yes, we need both. Do that within the group, and then you can do it within the public. And really, this work is about normalizing, how we talk about the need for affordable housing and normalizing the fact that conservation and housing don't need to be at odds, because in the past, we have been used as weapons against each other, but that's not really the case most of the time. Occasionally there may be a place where, we don't agree, and that's at the bottom of this slide. There's no expectation in doing this work that everyone will always agree. But by sharing priorities and understanding our landscape together, there's more chance that we will find agreement and that we will be able to find places where we can actively work together. One of the last things before just showing you some examples is something that I found extremely helpful. Was not a product of the work that we did, but something that came before. I served on my town's housing committee and was there helping to develop the affordable housing plan for the municipality. And as part of that work, the Center for Housing Opportunity, the Litchfield County Center for Housing Opportunity, created kind of a communications playbook called Activating New Champions. And this book, to me, made a huge difference in equipping me with what I needed to be able to talk to people about my affordable housing work. So I just wanted to give you a peek under the hood. That playbook goes through several strategies for, deepening support for affordable housing and being able to talk about and respond to people who, may be on, may not have the support yet, the firm support that they need to in order to move forward and be an advocate for affordable housing. So you see the different strategies over on the left, and on the right-hand side, without giving you time to read it now, I hope you'll access the report. But there's actually examples of disruptive comments that you might get and how you might respond to them, which I found extremely helpful. Okay, finally, and then I hope we can have a really robust conversation about this, a couple of examples in Litchfield County. And so here is, again, that map of our 8 towns, and there are 15 existing affordable housing sites already. So congrats to the housing counterparts on that really hard and very important work. And there are more on the way. So just to highlight a few, this is Salem Village. It is in Salisbury, Connecticut. In this case, this was not a, let's conserve some, let's build on some example. Rather, it's a parcel where affordable housing is being developed, and the Salisbury Association is consulting on very pleasing, native, shading, landscape designing. So a very nice way for them to be able to work together on something that will be very meaningful to their community. And then the last two are the more traditional, a little bit of conservation and a little bit of affordable housing. Haystack Woods in Norfolk, Connecticut, has a component where, down by the road, there will be affordable housing. I want to note the effort of the housing organization to really create sustainable housing that is environmentally progressive, climate resilient, et cetera, all things that we love. And that also backs up to open space that will provide a connection to a public park. So very nice to have this access to green space for the affordable housing. Very creative way to take a parcel and be able to do both. And then last, Gagarin Place in Litchfield, Connecticut, kind of similarly has, a portion of a property, or I think it's actually 2 parcels, but their parcels are next to each other. And towards the road, there is an affordable housing development that has very nice natural elements and takes into account, as you can see, some wet areas, but also preserves the working farmlands that is behind the housing. So again, a thoughtful, nice example. There will be more, I know. So I'm going to end my presentation. And I know that I've seen the chat lighting up, so.
Yes, it's Amy here. I'm trying to get myself back on screen. Here we go. Great. Connie, thank you so much. That was so interesting. I think, one of the things that really struck me with your presentation was when you got to NCLC, or the Northwest Connecticut Land Conservancy, because that is the largest land trust in the state by the number of acres that they conserve. They are, that land trust is a powerhouse in terms of conserving some of the most critical lands in the state, not only in that region, but lands in that region that impact the rest of the state. And yet they are now considering all of these issues when they are doing their strategic plan and integrating housing and other community issues into their work. So I think that is very insightful, and it's certainly very inspiring. So the other point that I just want to make before I turn it to Ricky to just grab a couple of these questions in the chat before then we open this up to more questions is Ella, you had asked about seeing anything done in Connecticut, I'm assuming, or maybe anywhere, but intersection of affordable housing, land trusts, and agriculture. And we do have a great example here And I did put, I was searching for that while Connie was talking, because I really wanted to get it in there to find it. And it is a terrific collaboration between David Bingham, who is the vice president of the Salem Land Trust and also a landowner who invested in some property and then worked with both the Southeastern Connecticut Community Land Trust, which we haven't talked about community land trusts yet, but maybe through our discussion we can get to that, as well as the Salem Land Trust. And so that a large portion of that parcel in Salem will be set aside for woodlands, open space, some meadow there. A portion of it with the farmhouse on it has already been sold and transferred to the Southeastern Connecticut Community Land Trust for affordable housing use. The house has been renovated and it will be used to house the individuals who will be farming about 10 acres of that property. So that is a really cool collaboration, and it's an example of the pop-up project that David was alluding to before. This one just came up, and it is one that, again, looking at these pathways, there are going to be opportunities that just pop up, and we would encourage you to explore some of the collaborative options that are available when they do. So with that, Ricky, I'm going to turn it over to you if there are any other questions or comments you want to highlight from the chat, and then we can go to some of the ones that we have here. And I do note that Scott Hunter, who